Hey folks, hey Chris. Thank you so much for joining us. I really excited about this, primarily because we're going into the holidays, and I just finished our budget, and I have no idea what I'm going to be next month as well. And I thought maybe the best person to have this conversation with is you. So hey, it's like now I get to talk to you. One, good excuse. Two, I can ask my finance team a little harder questions as well after this. That's what I'm hoping for. But let me just
Nice.
give you folks like a quick intro about me. I'm Siddharth. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Spendflo. Prior to starting Spendflo, I used to run the business operations team for a couple of early stage companies and growth stage companies. And prior to that, I was also an investment banker. So what I'm really excited about as well is part of the process is that when we started working in my previous role, we had to deal with a lot of SaaS vendors, and it was really hard for us to figure out how to like actually centrally buy, manage, and essentially figure out how to track usage and spend of all of these SaaS tools in one single place. And that's what we do at Spendflo, right? We help you guarantee savings on your SaaS spends and also track all your, get you insights into all your spends as well in one single place. I'm going to let Chris go and introduce himself as well.
Thank you, Sid. Good to see everybody. Hope everybody's safe and well. Yeah, we're getting to the Christmas time. So really excited to jump off this conversation. My name is Chris Ortega. I'm CEO of Fresh FP&A. I have over 17 plus years in accounting, corporate accounting, finance, FP&A, and financial leadership, primarily in high growth SaaS businesses. So from startup, scale up to seed to enterprise level companies I had the opportunity to work with. So really excited for this conversation. A lot of my clients, they're wrapping up their budgets and now they're getting right into the Christmas time. They're ready to take that time to rejuvenate and recharge. So this is the topic to help them, empower them. So when they hit the ground running for 2023, a little bit more about Fresh FP&A. So we're a consultancy focused on finance transformation and scalable solutions for businesses. Basically, we help finance organizations transform and scale their finance operations by providing fractional CFO and consulting services. So fractional CFO work, some of that project-based work to help organizations begin, start, and monitor their financial transformation journey. I do a lot of thought leadership in the global accounting, finance, FP&A, and CFO space. Check out these links. If you want to learn more about Fresh FP&A, there's the website right there. And make sure to follow us on LinkedIn at Fresh FP&A. So it's a little bit about me and Fresh FP&A.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction, Chris. So, I mean, I just went through the budgeting exercise, right? With my leaders and with my finance team as well. So what I'm dreading is I put in a lot of work into this. Now, I have no idea how to actually, what do I do next, right? Like now we have a budget. I'm going to get my actuals every month. So, but what's the next step in this process really, right? And how often should I be looking at this? What do you think are some great steps to follow once your budget is actually done?
Yeah, so I mean, the first one, as you mentioned, and to all of those, I hope you're wrapping up your 23 budget. If you're not done yet, hopefully you're close to the finish line. And I've worked with a lot of clients, and even in my professional career, right? All the time, energy, and effort and resources, not just within the finance organization, but across the business. One thing that I'm working on with some leading education is just about thinking critically about your budget, right? I think one of the first points that I mentioned in here is a lot of people spend so much time focused on precision versus accuracy. Let me dive a little deep more into that. So when you think about precision, precision is like that 95 to 98% confidence on the assumptions, the models, and the plan that you have, right? Accuracy is like that 60 to 80%. I'm accurate that these assumptions, these drivers, these models are going to move in the right direction. And one of the fundamental fallacies that I think a lot of finance organizations, they try to be precise in the next 12 months. Like, how are you going to have 98% confidence in the plan that you're presenting in the next 12 months? Right? Given that there's so much uncertainty, there's so much challenge, there's so many variables that change. So I think one of the first ways that you can think critically about your budget is balancing and setting that expectation with the business to say, hey, you know what? We're going to be precise and we're going to have a budget in maybe that next 3 to 6 months window, right? And then we want to be directionally accurate 6 to 12 months afterwards, right? So first off, begin with that. The second piece of it is like, start with the end of the conversation in mind, right? So like, if you're looking at your 2023 plan, there's a lot of different ways of taking it. You could take a bottoms up approach where you're looking at every single vendor and you're down to the details. Or you can say like, what are those big ticket items around revenue, around cash flow, around EBIT margin, around maybe CAC, around maybe customer lifetime value? Really start with, what do you want that end game to be? And then work your way down, right? And I think the last point that I'll just mention about thinking strategically about your budget is like, you got to connect the dots with the business. The worst thing that I've seen a lot of finance organizations do, and I've done this earlier in my career, is like, you produce this plan and you put all this work in and like you work with the business, and then that model goes away and people go on Christmas vacation and, you know, they get to January and then everybody starts the year revisiting so much of that information all over again. So as you can keep people connected, as you can set the right expectations around precision and accuracy as that relates to timelines, and as you start that conversation of thinking about the end and working your way back, I think those are some critical steps that you can take about thinking about your budget, which leads to like step number 2, you know, connecting the dots. As I mentioned earlier, right? Like, you've got your business partners involved, right? Maybe you got your sales and they're looking at all these different scenarios around bookings, around revenue, around, you know, customer acquisition costs. Maybe they're looking at like lead to opportunity throughput. You want to keep the business connected. And there's a great saying, there's a great quote that if you want to move fast, move alone. If you want to move together, if you want to move further, move together, right? So to me, that's, you got to bring the business along to this journey. Too many times, finance organizations do all this work, they stop that budget, and then the business does what the business is supposed to do. They go business. Like, the business is off, right? They're like, finance has done their thing. Keep them involved with it. Another thing that you can do, I think, around connecting the dots is being able to make those proactive, agile, persevere, or pivot conversations. So like, you may have an assumption that, hey, we're trying to keep our cash burn at $500,000 as an example, right? Maybe you get into January and you get 1 month of actuals, you get February, right? You're evaluating, do we pivot from that $500,000 assumption, or do we continue to persevere around that $5,000 assumption? So I think finance organizations need to have that speed and that agility and that connection in the business to make those pivot or persevere conversations.
That makes sense. And actually, that's a great point, Chris. One thing that really helped in some of the great CFOs that I've actually worked with and finance leaders, we had once our month end close was done, the first thing we did is get into a room as leaders and then look through all these numbers, right? And look through it together so that everybody gets an idea of like what they've spent money on, what the actuals look like against the budget. But doing it synchronously really helps. That's something that I've seen work really well. What are your thoughts on doing it synchronously or asynchronously as well? Especially with your business leaders?
I think it's a combination, right? So one of the things I always recommend, and I've always done when I started the fresh of the year closing down, was like, get a conversation and say, hey guys, let's revisit, right? It's like when you watch your favorite Netflix series, right? And you're watching that story unplay, it always replays like what happened. And it's a quick kind of like 15 seconds of like the last 3 episodes that just happened, or like last season. I like to do that with my business partners. I like to sit down with them and say, hey, let's recap where we are and the journey that we got to, right?
Do you typically do that on your one-on-ones with them, or do you typically get them in a group? What is your preference, or do you do both?
I do it at the entire group level. So I get in the entire leader, sales, marketing, operations, finance, HR. You have that kind of recap first to just reorientate everybody to, hey guys, here's the journey that we got to, right? Here's the assumptions that we made. Here's the plans that we have in place. Kind of like that quick kind of recap with the entire leadership team. And why that's important is because you get everybody anchored in, right? Then once you start at that strategic level with that conversation with everybody, now you can get to those individual streams, right? Now you could get that individual time with HR, the individual time with sales, the individual time with marketing. But for me, that recapping, that reorientation of where we are, what do we say we're going to do? What are we going to do? That's that recap. Now you can spend more time answering that question of like, all right, what are we going to continue to do about it? I think that's really important.
That's awesome. that actually leads to the third point. What do we actually talk about? What do we actually measure ourselves?
Yeah. So to me, I mean, this is the bag of metrics, right? And like to me, what I've done is highlight the major ones when you're looking at a very high growth SaaS business, right? The first one is net dollar retention rate, right? That could be net dollar retention rate. This is all about how do we continue to push value at the top line of the organization in SaaS businesses, right? SaaS businesses are broken up into two halves. First half, you're chasing as much new business as possible. Like you're chasing as much customers. Like you got Q1 and Q2, you're all about customer acquisition, right? And then typically when I've seen in Q3, Q4, you start focusing on that existing business, right? And the reason why that shifts is because when you look at your revenue, right? Like in the year, most of your revenue that you're going to get from new business, you're going to capture that in the first 2 quarters, right? Like you want to be closing as much new business in the first half of the year. That way it has some revenue impact inside of that current year. But once you shift into that second half of the year, it's all about upsell, cross sales. It's all about how are we bringing more value to the organization? So I think net dollar retention rate's a great one. Obviously, this is probably number one on my list and number one on the list for a lot of organizations. Cash burn, right? Cash burn, cash runway. How are you optimizing your spend? How are you really keeping track of the actual dollars in your bank account? This is something as a SaaS leader that I always keep track of. And profits are a dream. Cash is a reality. So how are you making sure you're keeping track of that all the time? Another one on the sales side of the business that I think is a leading indicator of success. How's your win rates doing? How's your lead? You can go into leads, you can go into opportunity, go into some of your marketing pipeline metrics. How are you overperforming there, right? Because if you have a very high successful win rate, but the number of leads and opportunities are not filling in the top of that funnel, you may run into downstream cash impacts, downstream revenue impacts that you need to be proactively aware of. And then my fourth one is one that I always used to measure. How is my budget to actual forecasting error, right? Some people may call this the standard deviation, but I always look at that forecasting error, right? Basically what this means is like if your budget was 100,000 and your actuals are, 90,000 or 110, you've got a 10% forecasting error on that, right? And earlier in the year, like you want that forecasting, that budget to actual forecasting error to be less than like 7-8%, right? If you're starting in January and your forecast error between your budget and actual is greater than 10%, you're probably going to get into a cycle where you're going to have to like replan that entire forecast for the year. So I've always looked at that as a proactive indicator to see how far our budget and actuals are dividing out, right? Because now you don't want to have the story with your business partners where they're like, Chris, why are we looking at this budget? That's way off. Like we're like 30% off to our budget. Why are we even talking about this? That is, I think, like a hidden gem of being able to proactively think about the business. Like once you start seeing those forecasting errors start to deviate, 10, 20, 30%, you're going to get to an opportunity where it's like, we need to replan and relook at the business because a lot of our assumptions, a lot of our plans are significantly off. So Sid, you're wrapping it up. How do these metrics fit into some of the ones that you're looking at in your business?
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously NRR, cash burn, win rates are all really important, but actually the fourth one really is, I didn't realize how important it was until you just explained it to me. We didn't actually look at it, like, but now I'm definitely going to, because we have like we have a net burn number, we have a gross burn number, we have an ARR target that we need to hit, right? So those are all forecasts that we have that technically we budgeted for all of that. But on my actuals, how we actually come in every month is really, really key, right? And early stage company, you have to close the book at the end of the month, right? And if that happens really well, and if this error rate kind of prolongs in the next 3 months of the year for us, it's something that it'll give us a really nice visibility into what we can do for the rest of the year as well. So that's really powerful. I'm going to add it to our kitty. I actually look at burn multiple a lot as well. Chris, I look at it a lot. There is net new ARR by net burn every month. We look at it a lot. The other thing is I actually look at like the ROAS metric. It's something that I've been looking at recently. Since we have a team that's global, not everything is like uniform, right? Like if you have your team mostly based in the US, it's pretty easy for you to like just actually run models on, hey, this is what salaries look like, and this is how compensation works, and it's really nice to forecast out payroll. But since we run globally and we're actually we have folks on different countries, the ROSE metric actually started making sense for us. The ROSE metric for us was, what is the amount of recurring revenue we have by all the people costs we have, right? And that gave us an idea of whether, hey, are we below one, above one? What does it look like? It's just a nice metric for us to see, hey, are we getting the best out of our people? But also, it's not just the number of people, right? People keep saying ARR per head, but my costs for hiring, say, in India, or my costs for hiring in the US are very different. So I can't do ARR per head. It's just like something that's very unique to our business and I think a lot of global businesses now. So that's something that we've added on, Chris. So just wanted your thoughts on that. What do you think about that? Those metrics?
I mean, obviously on the people side of it as well too. I think one of the like most important metrics that you can start getting a pulse on is a metric that I call the employee net promoter score, right? So typically we measure net promoter score in a lot of our customers, right? Like we ask them, how likely are you recommend our product, our solution to your network, to your colleagues, and we get, it's a scale from 0 to 10, measuring like the likelihood of them recommending, right? 8 to 10, you are a promoter. 5 to 7, you're neutral, and anything below 5, you're like a detractor, right? You can take that same pulse and get that for your employees, right? Like that was one thing I always worked on the people side with our HR leaders to say, like, let's set quarterly targets for our net promoter, for our employee promoter score, because that tells you like the satisfaction of your employees, right? Like, one thing, and it's proactively, right? Like if you started off in a very positive position where you had, more promoters than you had detractors, which is how you calculate that score, then right? Okay, people are doing well. How are we keeping that pulse? Are we giving everybody what they need? Because if you start looking at pretty significant early attrition rates in your employees early on in the year, right? That's a very, and if, of course, if it's in critical positions, right? Like if you start seeing high attrition rates in your sales and your marketing team, right? The ramp time to get that talent, to get them on board, to get them to be productive, to actually hit these aggressive revenue and bookings targets, you're going to be in pretty bad shape. So on the people side, I would actually add that the employee net promoter score that you can, it's a simple question, right? You ask your employees, how likely would you recommend coming and work at our organization to your friends, your family, your colleagues, your network, right? It's a great fundamental question to ask. And that gives you a lot of insight around the people side, which I think is really a gap that a lot of CFOs don't.
Yeah. And the funny part is that's your largest spend, right? As an organization. Yeah, exactly. So like, I mean, look at this, right? Like this is something that we speak about a lot, right? Like, but like, I wanted to get your thoughts on this, right? So obviously payroll is a really large cost, but for most companies, where do you see the largest spends inside an organization?
I mean, I think you've wrapped it up right here, right? You've got those three elements: payroll, marketing, and SaaS spend. That's about 80-90% of expenses right there, right? You got other things in there, right? But those are covering the big elements of it. But number 3 is like, I've always considered that a greenfield opportunity for CFOs, right? When you think about a lot of organizations that have moved to either a hybrid, remote, or fully in office, the level of SaaS spend, right? First, when you look at the traditional CFO, the first place that they go to either reduce costs or increase burn rate, they go look at the payroll first, right? And this saddens me, right? Because you see it constantly again, where organizations are laying off 20% of their workforce, 15% of their workforce, but all these different things. And my thing is like, if you go look at your SaaS spend, that could be a huge opportunity, right? Because in a very scale up to start up to scale up culture, you may not have that in-source procurement, but this is an opportunity that you can go get a partner to really wrangle in that and that has immediate cash impacts inside your organization. And it can significantly increase the cash runway. It can reduce costs that you have. And it's one of the first elements that when I led organizations in the finance realm, I would go to the people last, right? Yes,
Yeah.
I'm going to getting rid of people. That was the last option. That wasn't my first option that I took. I said,
Yeah.
what are things that we can reduce around cash? How can we get more efficient around our marketing spend? How can we standardize, a lot of our cost of goods sold costs, which
Yeah.
typically rest in like
Exactly.
AWS or things like that. Like, how
Yeah.
could you go look at these elements and what in-year impact do they have on cost and cash flow that you can go to immediately make before you go look at the people? So to
Yeah.
me, I think like from a mindset, these are all the most important significant costs. But when you're looking about making improvements, reverse them. Look at your SaaS spend, look at your marketing spend, start with the people last.
Yeah. And so it's a very good point, actually. I forgot to mention this in in the previous slide as well. There are two other metrics that I really track. It's our COGS on a month-on-month basis, and it's also our CAC, right? And the two things that go into, obviously, inside our COGS, right? There's obviously there is customer success cost. There's a bunch of like payroll cost that goes into it, but most of it is also all the systems and tooling that you're using to power your platform. So a lot of your SaaS and cloud spends are in your COGS. And the second piece is actually your CAC, right? So even in your CAC, right, you have all your sales and marketing spend there. And the largest, like in most organizations, the people who spend the most on sales on SaaS are actually sales and marketing, right? Typically, right?
Mm-hmm.
And actually adds up to your blended CAC. So that affects your payback periods as well. It affects a lot of the things that you're working on. So those are the two things that people just don't see. And when you need to drop payback periods less than 12 months. Everybody wants their runways to increase. Everybody wants their blended CAC to be really beautiful. You can't do all of that. And like, you're right, you have to actually flip this all around. But it's hard because their entire spend is actually decentralized, right? Like it's really hard. Month-end closes with SaaS spends are really hard because it's decentralized. You have no idea where you're spending that money. Are they actually getting usage of it? Do they actually like it or not? And then you need to go save money, right? The saving money part is like the end of it. But figuring out these problems constitutes 80% of it, right? And then you actually have to save money. So I mean, just a quick plug on what we do over here, right? Like that's essentially what we do. We essentially centralize all your spend, your usage, and employee sentiment of all your SaaS tools, along with your contract details. And we use our benchmark data to guarantee savings on your SaaS spends, right? Just to give you an idea of like, so that you don't have to do it yourself. You don't have to go through the hard job of figuring all of these steps out and then going and actually saving money on it. So that's just a quick overview.
And Sid, if I can
yeah,
add,
please.
Sid, like the reason why this is so important for those SaaS leaders, those CFOs, those VPs of finance, those finance leaders, right? When I manage organizations and have clients, right, procurement and like finding out this information, it's like, you don't have that dedicated procurement partner. And like, to me, I think it's like shifting away is like, this is bringing in a partner to help you around this, right?
Exactly.
Not only is like Spendflo going to help you with the tool and technology to get all the compliance and wrangle in the data and get all the contracts, but they're going to help you be your centralized procurement partner, right? And like that's going to save you money as well too, right? So I think there's so much value because like when you look at the office of the CFO, right? Traditionally, we don't have the luxury of being able to, like, when sales are going up, you hire more salespeople, right? You go hire more marketing people, right? When sales are going up, we don't go hire more finance people, right? We have to be able to turn $1 into like $3, right? When the CEO's like, nope, finance, you get $3. You don't get that $5, right?
Yeah.
So this is a way that you could go get that resource, get that horsepower, get that expertise, get that partner to help manage you this side of the business, because to a high growth CFO, you're wearing a lot of different hats already, right? You got the investor relations, you're managing the business, you're trying to manage a team, you're trying to be a great finance business partner, you're trying to go maybe raise funds. You've got a lot on your plate. Yeah. So this is an opportunity to bring in that partner in the conversation. They help strategically navigate it. Plus, they give you a technology to help you centralize and get one version of the truth around that. So I highly recommend all those VPs, all those finance. If you're looking for a great partner, definitely check it out.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. You do a much better job than me right now, and as well. I'm gonna pitch Fresh F3NA next as well. So do it. just work with Chris, folks. That's basically the pitch, right? But yeah, we have a couple of questions from the audience as well. Just wondering, like, Mida, do you just mind putting them in the chat, or I think it's
okay.
Hold on.
I see it. I got it open in front of me.
Oh, okay, perfect. I think
okay. So one of the questions was, what are the top metrics to look into to reduce cash burn and unlock growth? So that's one of the questions. I think I'll kick this one off, Sid, and love to hear from you on this one. I think when you look at cash burn, right, this one to me is where there's so much rich data around this. The first place I recommend everybody to start, right, is go look at your AP first. Go look at your AP first. Go look at all the spend that you have across your organization, right? And I know this is something that Spendflo, this is what you help organizations do, right? Like, to me, go look at your AP, go look at where's all this outflow going, right? Most of it's going to, your AP is not going to flow through your payroll's not going to flow through your AP, but go look at that, right? That's a greenfield opportunity to go look at some cash savings. Another way is on the sales side of the business, right? Let's talk to the salespeople, right? A lot of times when I think about the inflow of cash, right? One way and one super trick that finance organizations can go take now, what is your ideal contract that you want to sell to a customer? So for example, when I led SaaS businesses, the best contract that we have, multi-year, paid up front, right? And I walked through the sales organization. I said, this is why this is the best contract. We get a multi-year agreement. We've already braked in a 30% net dollar retention rate increase. It's annual upfront. That means we get all the cash, and the revenue doesn't change. It's the revenue, but the cash characteristics on this, that it helps us get our cash flow faster, and it helps us like automatically drop in an increase of our net dollar retention rate in there. Once I show the sales organization of why this is the ideal contract, and oh, by the way, we incentivize the sales organization to say, if you sell this kind of contract, you get more commissions on it. So when you tell people what's in it for them and they understand they're making more money, and you show them why this is the best contract, we have the sales organization gangbusters around this. And that's a part of finance venturing outside to go like connect the dots, as we talked about, right? Like, that's a way, negotiate contracts, even on the playable side. You can renegotiate some contracts, get more favorable terms. You can leverage his line of credit. My whole in answering this question is, as I talked about all these, none of those mention getting rid of one person. None of those, right? These are all opportunities that are more strategic that you could be thinking about versus like, hey, our cash burn is higher than what we go expect. We need to stop our hiring. We need to not pay out merits. We need to let 30% go. Like, we have to shift that traditional mindset, look at a more modern-based approach. Go look at the arsenal of tools that the CFO have in partnership inside the business. Start there first.
Yeah, it actually makes sense. This is actually a quick question from Thomas as well. How do you approach analyzing and providing a go, no-go investment decision for tech department hiring budgets, right? Engineering and product hiring, especially, because it's not like sales hiring, right? Like, sales hiring has a quota, so it's like easy to make that trade-off. I struggle with this all the time. So because Ajay, my CDO, keeps always asking me for more engineers, but I want to say yes, but how do I say yes, Chris?
Yeah, I think you look at the product roadmap, right? So like, to me, I always base it on the product roadmap. And yes, you got engineers and you got your product roadmap. Maybe it's broken out semi-annually, annually, or quarterly. The best product roadmap you want is at least a quarterly roadmap. Like, you want to be releasing new features at least on a quarterly basis. And then quantify that by looking at, okay, if we go do this, we make this investment, we get this information back from our customers, what's the addressable market that we can go get, right? So this is where, like, as a CFO, I never wanted to be like the CFO no. I wanted to be the CFO maybe, right? I want to be the CFO maybe, but let's work on developing this business case together. Let's understand the impact, the risk, and the opportunity together before, you get a lot of CFOs and they're like, let's make spend, and they go look at a metric. They're like, you're behind your metric. No, right? Versus like, hey, like, how can we actually prioritize these things, right? So to me, it's looking at the product roadmap, it's looking at the addressable market and the value that you can get, and being actually open to listen to the conversation. Don't be CFO no, be CFO maybes.
Yeah, I like that. Thomas, I hope that answers your question. Please feel free to ask more if you like as well. And Roylee had another question, Chris. It's in terms of modeling, slash budgeting deferred revenue for companies that have varying billing cycles, like quarterly, annual, monthly. Are you using a billing schedule from your SBRM, or are you simply using deferred revenue as a percentage of ARR? Sorry, what is an SBRM for us noobs as well, Chris?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with SBRM. I don't.
But
I'm curious of what that is. I've never seen that
yeah,
term before. Maybe it's like a model, but I've seen
yeah,
some organizations you can have that in a tool and technology, right, where it amortizes out your billing schedules to see what a subscription billing and revenue
got it,
management system. That's what
got
I
it,
thought it
makes
was.
sense. Oh
Okay,
yeah,
thank you, Rolly. Yeah. So I've actually like had it both ways, right? Like I've actually used the tool. There's a really great tool out there, not to plug a lot of other tools, but it's a tool called Maxio, and
Mm,
they measure all different kind of billing frequencies, whether you're usage based, typical. Like I've leveraged those systems, and that is really good because it gives you all of that detail, right? You can make a lot of those assumptions inside of that tool that show your revenue, show your cash, show your net dollar retention rate, a lot of the key metrics that you have in there. The simplified version of it would be the deferred revenue of ARR, right? That's more of a top down metric that you would have. But the most important thing is like you can go look at that data, right, and say, okay, here's our composition of customers, right? How many of them are monthly? How many of them are quarterly? How many are semi-annually? How many are annually? Quantify the dollar amount, right? What are they? What are their sales cycles in there? And say, okay, we want to set an initiative to where we want to convert 25% of these monthly to a quarterly. We want to take these quarterly to semi-annually. Here's the different renewal rates that we have in terms of when that renewal cycle starts.
mm-hmm.
So give us 3 to 4 months to start having that conversation on the CSM level, right? Start getting those conversations involved, maybe in the quarterly QBRs that you do, to start navigating that customer. So when it gets to that renewal, now you provided the value in the software. That's a way of being able to look at that as well to help with that cash flow element side of it. But yeah, I've managed it inside of systems. I've also managed it too in Excel, which is not obviously the preferred method to be able to do it. But yeah, huge impact in breaking that down.
That makes sense.
Rolly, I hope that answers your question.
This is about organizational. I think it's how can we measure organizational efficiency as well? Like, is that something that you really want to worry about now? Is the first question, right? And do we measure it? I think it's a very tricky one.
Yeah, I mean, organizational efficiency, right? I would be curious of like what is actually what are you trying to get out of that, right? To me, I think a lot of times in finance we measure too many different things, right? So like, is organizational efficiency, is that cash flows, that revenue? Like, what is efficiency, right? And also, again, too, efficiency is going to mean a lot of different things to every version of the business, right? Efficiency is different in sales, that is different in marketing, it's different in operations, it's different in client success, it's different in your project groups, it's different in finance. So I think when you say organizational efficiency, you got to really understand like what does that mean and what's in it for the business on those. So I don't really have like a go-to measure to say here's the metric that measures organizational efficiency.
I think
it's really
it's really tricky, right? Like super tricky, especially as as a founder, right? It's like if I start measuring it, I think I'll go like, thank God I lost my hair before. Those things as well. Yeah, this is another one, right? That we had basically this is just to measure cash flow sustainability, right? Like how you actually like, is collection something that you're actually worried about? What percentage of collections? And so, I mean, like cash flow efficiency is a different thing. I think it's more collections efficiency as well. And then from your revenue side, and then how you actually optimizing that on a month-on-month basis as well. Because like if you have different billing cycles, I wish all our contracts were like annual upfront for 2 years, paid all upfront for 2 years. That would be amazing. But it's not really the truth, right?
Yeah, I think cash flow sustainability, right? And cash flow sustainability is not just your inflows, right? It's your outflows as well, too, right?
Yeah.
Like this is one, if there's one takeaway that every finance leader, everybody takes away from this, you need to be measuring cash and looking at cash every day. Like that is something like as when I was in the role, like first day, like I come in, even for my business, I walk in, I got my Power BI dashboard. And the first thing I'm looking at is like cash. Like, let's look at how this is going, right? Because that is going to be a more leading indicator, right? Because like if your revenue is going to have a tail when you close a contract, it's got implementation. Like revenue always has a tail. It always has a deferred revenue piece of it. Cash is like, how are you looking at that? And tips around sustainability, having that conversation, having that inspection. I think you can take the same budget to actual forecast error rate that you look at that. How are you managing the tactics? And another way that I would ensure cash flow sustainability within my finance organization, with my team, I would set one quarterly OKR that we would have each individually around cash, right? How are we optimizing cash? How are we bringing in more cash? How are we making sure we inspect that and set that as like a quarterly objective for the finance organization to provide to the business? Keep the communication. Don't just keep like the cash flow and where we're tracking to just the finance organization. Make sure the leaders are informed, make sure you're monitoring it, and make sure you're, able to make those pivot or persevere conversations if you see it actually improving or getting worse.
Makes sense. This is one about how we track burn multiples and sales efficiency for a business where annual sales cycles and 75% of all the contracts go live in 1 month of the year, right? Oh man, this sounds tricky, right? In all honesty, I don't have an answer. Do you?
Yeah, and when you look at the sales side of the business, I love the revenue ops side of the business. Like that was one. Sales have always been my great business partners, and like one of the roles I always made sure I had in the budget was like a rev ops person. Because yeah, I always had a rev ops person in the sales organization because like they were like my special ops FP&A person, and I'm like they're gonna take the business. They're going to take that mindset, but they're also going to learn from me from that financial discipline, and they're going to be entrenched in it. And every month on a weekly basis, we will review things together, lead to opportunity throughput, right? So how are your leads transitioning through your different sales stages, right? Like how is that velocity going? I measure that as like opportunity velocity. Another way that you would look at it is like when you're identifying some of those key marketing spends, how are you making sure earlier in the year you're quantifying attribution and ROI? That is so important to be able to do that. I think another third one that we will look at as well too is when we look at the overall like existing business side of the business, right? How are we aligning our QBR schedules proactively to get ahead of those renewal cycles, right? Because like some SaaS businesses I've been a part of, we had very like Q2 and Q3 were our heavy renewal cycles for our business. So in Q1, we spent so much time like getting that value, having the conversation, making sure we're looking at like customers don't have open tickets. We did so much work. So when it got into that renewal conversation, when we're promoting like a new product or, a contract increase, it made that renewal conversation mostly about value. So I think that's another way on the sales side of the business. Really get tight with that existing business group, measure your velocity in your sales pipeline, and making sure that you're doing proper marketing attribution and ROI around your marketing spend. I think those are the three big elements that when I partnered in sales and marketing, we always focused on.
Yeah, I think just one last question. I think this is a question for me from Royally as well. She advises her portfolio companies to track CAC on a trailing 12-month basis, right? But she's actually advising them to track it on a trailing 3-month basis and the respective calculation rate that mirrors average sales cycles, right? So for us, like in personally for Spendflo, we actually look at it on a 45-day period. 45-day period or so, that's what our sales cycles look like, right? So I'm actually doing it monthly. I'm actually doing it 45-day cycles. It's a little weird for us because we've only been going to market for the last 8 months or 9 months or so. But I think I book it every month, but I also look at it with the SaaS magic number and the blended CAC actually. So I actually use blended CAC. I don't use actual like fully loaded CAC because we haven't been around for more than a year. Like we haven't been selling for more than a year. That's my view on it. But like, Chris, what's your take?
Yeah, so I get a lot of SaaS people that I reach out to, and they say, Chris, we've been looking at CAC and customer lifetime value and the magic number and our rule of 40 over the last 12 months. I'm like, there's so much that goes on in 12 months. Like that's not don't do that, right? Like get away from that. And maybe what I've broken them down to is like, okay, keep that 12-month, but break that down into 3 different periods. Look at like a 90-day, right? And this gets back to my point that I mentioned earlier around precision and accuracy, right? You want to be precise in what you think your CAC's going to be in the next 90 days, right? Like you want to have a pretty tight deviation, right? If you think your CAC's going to be, I don't know, like $20,000 or something, right? And you want that in the next 90 days to be plus or minus, best case 3%, right? 3% between that target. So you look at it in 3 months, you look at it in 6 months, and then you look at it first half of the year, second half of the year, and then 12 months, right? Now you've got a lot of different data points that are at different time periods that now you can compare and now you can look at. You can even take all 5 of those and take like a blended rate, right? And it's not like you're doing, more calculations. You're just breaking out those time periods, right? And when you look at the 3 months, you're like, all right, I want to be precise there. We need to be 98% there. In this next 90 days, we need to be directionally accurate on that one, 12 months. So take that CAC out at a 12-month, break it out in different data points and measure it, track it. And like I mentioned earlier, be ready to make those pivot or persevere conversations if you see that CAC moving outside of a forecasting area that you're not comfortable with. That's how I recommend SaaS businesses.
That actually makes sense. Like, I think we just have like thank you for so much for spending the time with us, Chris. This is amazing. Yeah. I actually learned a ton. I hope the audience learned a ton as well. Looking at the engagement, it looks really great. It's just a quick poll question for the people in the audience, and then you're off on vacation now, aren't you? So
yeah, I'm actually taking some time off. And to that poll question, everybody should be saying yes. Like I want to get the results and see who said no or maybe. Getting control of your SaaS spend and getting with a partner to really like have a strategy, have a vision, have a strategy, have the tactics, have the milestones and the metrics around your SaaS spend. If you're looking for a way to really shine as a CFO, VP of finance, or finance manager, that is a greenfield opportunity. You're going to win. And make sure for everybody, any other questions, comments, clarifications, any way that I can help, check me out on LinkedIn. I'm all over LinkedIn, Chris Ortega. If you want to learn more about Fresh FP&A, check us out at www.freshfpa.com. Happy to connect and help anybody else. But yes, get control of your SaaS spend for 2023. That should be a goal for everybody.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chris. Happy holidays, everyone. It's the last webinar for the month. I'm really excited as well. So thank you so much, Chris. See you soon.